As chairman and CEO of one of the world's most respected companies, Jeffrey Immelt has positioned General Electric as a leading technology company moving into the global landscape of the future. Named one of the world's best CEOs by Barron's 3 times, Jeff was born and raised in the culture of this legendary company, his father working at GE's Aircraft Engines division in Cincinnati, Ohio for 38 years. After receiving his Harvard MBA, Jeff quickly rose through the ranks of GE. In 2001, he officially took the reins as chairman and CEO. In the tumultuous years since taking the helm, Jeff has prepared GE for the uncertain future with his global outlook, focus on people development, and emphasis on innovation. Jeff's vision extends to America's future as well, serving as chair on President Obama's Council on Jobs and Competitiveness during Obama's first term. Please give Jeffrey Immelt a warm welcome.
Thanks, Bill. Well, Jeff, I almost feel guilty about you having said yes to this event because I know right now, or at least in the last couple weeks, you've been in the middle of one of the biggest acquisitions of your career. I think you're purchasing a company that has about 1/3 of the value of France's GNP.
Not quite that much.
But I mean, a huge acquisition. And how do you decide who you empower to make deals when they kind of just go do them themselves? You've been flying back and forth to France for the last month. And when do you empower someone to just go make a big deal? Or when do you say, hey, you know what, I need to be at the table myself?
So I think, Bill, it's a great question. You know, we've got a great team at GE. People can see things strategically. The business people kind of lead that process. I would say the name of the company is Alstom, and it was a historic French national champion, a very proud French company, and one that really, in where the world's going today, I think with globalization and everything, we felt like we could make it better. So this was a big move for the company. So the teams really worked on it strategically and things like that. But I think the leader, you know, sometimes when it's the most important thing the company's working on, you just don't delegate that, right? You have to step in, and you do that for a number of reasons. One is experience. You know, I've done hundreds of deals. I'm well known in France. I've run businesses there, and so I had a lot of contextual points, but also to protect your team a little bit. You know, in other words, I think it's one of those things where it's so important and so identified with the company that you have to be hands-on in times like that. And I think, you know, Carly talked a little bit about it earlier. In our company, hierarchy just in the end doesn't mean that much. I mean, people come and say, can you show me the organization chart? And I say, yeah, here's what it looks like, except it doesn't work that way. You know,
Yeah.
There's a million. So I think in this case, we all work together as a team. In fact, one of the things that made it fun was we worked together as a team. And then in the end, you got to go with your gut. You know, I had to make a presentation. Somebody from GE had to make a presentation to the French version of the House of Representatives, right?
Yeah. I actually read the speech that you gave to the French Parliament, in essence. And I wanted to ask you, did you write that speech?
So I wrote most of it.
Yeah.
And everybody around me...
Because it was so good, I thought you ought to be a pastor.
Yeah, no, really. Well,
we have an opening this weekend if you'd like to preach.
This deal was a religious experience, I would have to say, Bill. But maybe not that great. But everybody around me said, you don't do it. You shouldn't go do that. Let's let this person or that person. And I said, no, this is the most important thing to the company. I'm going to do it myself. Sink or swim, let's go. And I think this notion of being all in, you know, throughout my career, there's never been one moment when any job in the company was beneath me. You know, in other words, I think no matter what it is, sometimes people say that, well, that's not what a CEO does, or we want to protect you. Guess what? It doesn't work that way. You know, you got to be involved. And in our company, really, everybody's a worker.
Yeah. Hey, I was told by a secret source that you're the purest natural leader that he has ever seen in his life. Grade school, high school, college, athletics, fraternity, and so. When did you become self-aware that you were a leader?
Well, first I'd like to say thanks, Mom, for talking to Bill. So Love you. So I don't think anybody really ever thinks of it quite that way. I had great parents, fantastic parents. I grew up as an athlete, so athletics gives you a chance early on to do something where you have to be accountable, yourself and to the team. So that taught me great skills. And I think, from the time I was at an early age, I always wanted to do my best without ever losing sight of the kind of person I wanted to be. And this combination, I think, of self-confidence and self-awareness, I've always tried to demonstrate that. And that and the fact of never feared accountability. In other words, I think when you're, again, like I said, I had great parents. They taught me not to be afraid. They said, you can do it. And I think this notion of both feeling that yourself, but liking to pass it on in that way, however that turns out is how it turns out. And I think being willing to make to take chances and make mistakes and be accountable for those mistakes, it all blends together.
Okay, Jeff, I've looked forward to asking you this question for a long time. You got finished with your studies at Dartmouth and Harvard, and then you enter the workforce at GE. There's over 300,000 employees, and they're all bright, they're all well-educated. And did you have a plan when you first joined the company of how you were going to differentiate yourself from everybody else in the pile that's working hard? And so did you have a plan for that, or did you just put your head down and do what you were told?
So I think anybody that says their plan when they go to work for a big company like GE is to become CEO is a little weird. In other words, it's just the odds are so much against you. I thought I'd learn to be a manager, learn what it meant to be a business person 5 or 10 years, and then raise my head and see where it took me. And I got lucky. I mean, in many ways, the jobs I had were fun. The people I got a chance to work with, I loved, and I got lucky. I'd say a couple things I'd say, Bill, is for me, it was always about the work, right? So it was never about the career. It was about the creating things and the work. And I've just, the thing that's great about a company like GE is you can create the future. And I love that, and I always worked hard at it, and I always loved it. And the other thing that I would say in big and small institutions is your peers ultimately decide how far you go.
That's right.
In other words, the person that you work for kind of has to like you, really. And the people that work for you, they depend on you. But your peers are, that you have to earn. And I think if you're more of a giver than a taker, your peers sense that. And in the end, I'd say in big institutions or any institution, it's this horizontal strength is what keeps institutions together. And that's, I loved work, and I tried in my career to be a good friend, to be a good teammate, to be a good partner, to be a good coworker, and those things come together sometimes. And luck. I mean, let's face it. You got to have a little bit of luck, ultimately.
Hey, as your career was advancing, Jack Welch one time assigned you what appeared to be a terrible job. There was a troubled appliance company in Kentucky, and he said, it's your job to fix that. Tell us about that experience. Were you glad to get the assignment? Do you hold a grudge to this day? I mean,
no, I was 32 years old, and it really gave me the confidence to do what I do today. I had started my career in GE's plastics business, which was a super high growth, very fast-paced business. And then our appliance business in the late 1980s, we made a compressor where 100% of them ended up failing, right? And so I went in to join the service organization and lead the service organization that had the responsibility of going into people's homes and fixing it. And when I tell people today about career advice, I always say, hopefully you don't cause it, but be around a crisis early in your career. Because we can't tell anything about you when the sun's up. We can't tell anything about you as a leader when times are good. But we can tell a lot about culture and leadership and things like that when times are really tough. And I had this for 3 years, from ages 32 to 35, with 7,000 people working for me. And it was an amazing experience. I made all of our leaders, including me, learn how to fix a compressor. Now, fixing a compressor turns out to be really hard. So the average time, it took 105 minutes for a good technician. My best time was like 300 minutes, right? And I'd sit on somebody's kitchen floor while the ice cream melts. You learn a little humility doing that, and you learn a lot about your organizations. And then I would say, Bill, at a very early age, this was the highest reserve the company at that time had ever taken. And I had to go to Fairfield with my bosses and present to Jack Welch, who was a reasonably tough guy. And we made the presentation. It was the toughest 4 hours I can ever remember. And I'm walking out the door, and he, believe me, this was tough. And he puts his arm around and says, I just want you to know you're doing a good job. I said, it didn't feel that way the last 4 hours. But it taught me about leadership in his case, which is setting high standards, and I got that at an early age. It was great.
Okay, so I want to jump ahead a little bit, because you eventually, after an arduous succession plan that Jack did, you were chosen to be the new CEO of this multinational, multi-billion-dollar company. You may have had the shortest CEO honeymoon in corporate history. How long were you in the CEO chair before the 9/11 crisis happened?
So I became CEO and chairman on a Friday, September 7th. And then I was in Seattle, Washington, making a sales call on Boeing on September 11th. And it impacted virtually every part of the company. I mean, it's an amazing tragedy. So whatever happened to the company, or to me, is small by comparison to what happened to our great country. But it was, in many ways, Bill, I think about the incident, but I think about it also, a lot of things were going on at the same time. You had Enron, you had 9/11, and it was really the end of a relatively stable, in retrospect, period of time, the 1980s and 1990s. And we just live in a more volatile time today. Since then, the financial crisis. I mean, if you get up, I got up this morning in the hotel and turn on TV, 30 minutes, you're pretty bummed out, really. Doesn't matter what channel you watch. And we sold our media business, so I really mean that now.
No, it doesn't.
But, I think people, it goes back to your theme of what you're trying to do, which is leadership. We live in a volatile time, and we're going to live in this time for a while, not a year or two. And people aren't going to be given the luxury to go backwards. We're not going to be able to go back to 1956 or 1997 or the Founding Fathers or 2005. We don't have that luxury. And I've had the chance to lead a great company during a very volatile time, but I think the best leaders go forward. I think the best leaders keep their people safe, keep their company safe, don't do foolish things, but the best leaders go forward. See the world as it is, figure out a way to accomplish what you have to do. And I've never seen a time in our company anyhow, and I've worked here for 32 years, where the value of leadership is more important. People want to know, what am I working on? What can I believe in? Where can we go? And I think leaders today more than ever have to do it. And there's great opportunity. I was at the Heads of State Summit last week in Washington, D.C. for Africa. The year I became CEO, GE had, let's say, $300 million of revenue in the continent of Africa. This year we'll have $6.5 billion of revenue. That's 10 or 12 years. So there's opportunities out there, but you have to go seize them. And you just need to give people a sense of, here's the future. We're going to work on it together. We're going to play to win. But we're going to live in this period of volatility, I think, for a while.
Okay, now, again, I've looked forward to asking you this question for a long, long time. I read a lot about places where leadership is taught. And GE has this facility called Crotonville, which is, a couple hours away from your actual corporate headquarters. And that's like a leadership development university. And it's probably the most famous of its kind in the corporate world that I know of. For those who have never heard about what happens at Crotonville, just kind of start from the beginning. Why is that place so important to GE? Why do you put so much of your time into that gathering or those gatherings? Tell us about Crotonville.
So I lead a big company. I lead a company that's about $160 billion in revenue, and it's 8 divisions, 170 countries around the world. And you need to have certain things that drive the oneness of the company, the culture of the company. So we invest about $1 billion a year in training, both distributed and centrally.
Yeah, now let me go back to that, because I didn't believe the figure when I read it the first time. $1 billion a year in leadership development.
Yeah. So it's a massive undertaking, and the campus we have is about an hour. It's in just about an hour outside of New York City. It's been around for 50 years, and it was always the notion that those things can drive the oneness of the company. Now, on leadership, I think leadership only has a certain amount of shelf life. So in other words, I think there's certain fundamentals of leadership that don't change. It's a commitment to integrity, a commitment to performance, a commitment to change. But 2014 is very different than 2004, is very different than 1994. So you have to constantly be tuning up your leadership. And we try to do that. So we go study Google or HP or other companies and figure out how they're training their people, try to bring that back. And we bring people together, and we expect our leaders, like me, to go train and teach. So twice a month, I'm there teaching people on the team. And it's a good way for me to talk about what's important, talk about what's contemporary, but it also takes away all the layers. So I can sit in front of, 60 people, and I get real-time feedback on what's going on. I get their advice, and I feed off what they're saying. So we look at leadership as a strategic imperative for the company. It's one of the things that can differentiate the company, but we also look at it as one of the things that can drive the oneness of the company. We have a culture, mission-based, search for a better way, solutions-oriented. We're a we company, not a me company. And we feed people that when they come to our training class, and people can decide whether this is for them or not, but we think culture and leadership are really fundamental to the strategy of the company.
Okay, so after you put $1 billion a year in, and you have skin in the game, you're driving back and forth or flying back and forth, and you're engaged with all these people yourself. And then one of your executives that you've put a decade worth of your training into comes into your office and says, I am going to leave GE after you've trained me and invested in me. How does that make you feel?
I was saying to Bill, you never dislike somebody more than the 15 minutes they're in your office resigning. It's such a personal, because to me it's just so, it's personal, deeply personal.
Still, to you, after
Still,
all
oh my
these
God, I mean, I just can't believe why anybody would ever leave GE. I just can't. I don't understand why people buy from Siemens. I don't know why anybody, it drives me crazy, right? Insane. But, we train people because we want them to be self-confident. In other words, I don't want people to come to work at GE out of fear. I want them I want them all to know that they can get another job. So let's leave fear out of the workplace, and let's come to work because I love what I do. I want to make a difference. And so I view it as it's a trade. It's my job to make sure they're enjoying what they do. And if they feel like they can live their dreams someplace else, that's the way it should be. And really, it's, I believe in the open market.
You smile and say, it's just been a joy making this investment in you.
I shun them for like 45 days or something like that. But then I treat them like alumni. And I love when they're successful, and we're all great friends, ultimately. But I don't want people, you don't want people to come to work because they're so afraid they can't get another job. You want them to be on fire when they come to work.
So Jack Welch told me this one time, and then a while back you were saying the same thing, that you believe in creating good GE alumnists. So Jack said that when someone actually did leave the company, he wanted to sort of stay in touch with them and these kinds of things, and you have the same philosophy.
He did after a certain period. Again, I think, look,
maybe a year or so with him.
We want people to live their dreams.
Yeah.
You know, in other words, I think it's good that you have a change in leadership and people go run companies. And then, you know, I learn from them and vice versa. And I just think it's just, and we're not a perfect company, but GE is about the institution. It's not about any one individual, really. I think from the day you go to work there to the day you leave, you work in a place where the company comes first. And so that's known to everybody. And so I think it's a camaraderie that exists because of that gets handed down generation by generation. And we root for each other. We're proud of each other. And that's the way it should be.
Okay, like a twin question, you can answer it in any order. When you see X quality in one of your workers, what is that quality that you see where it strikes you in the gut and you go, I want to keep my eye on that person and maybe promote them? And what is the X factor when you see it, you go, I don't want to work with that person. If that doesn't change, that person's not going to work here. What are sort of the polar opposite? This is what really fires me up and gets me going with someone. This is what turns me off, and I want to get rid of them if I have to.
So I would say the differentiator is the willingness to stand apart, the willingness to buck the system.
Really?
You know, I think, you know, this is a weird, bizarre almost, but it's, you know, you can't run a big company without rules. But how did I become CEO? I never took no for an answer, right?
You broke the
So
rule.
you want somebody who understands the tapestry of, you know, and would never come close to the line that Carly talked about, but at the same time, questions authority, drives change, is willingness, you know, in a big company, so few people are just willing to stand apart and say, you know, this is what we're going to go do today. Yeah. And about, I'd say 3 times a year, 4 times a year. It's not zero. You know, we bring the top 35 people together once a quarter, and I'll say to the team, hey team, we're gonna just go do this. I've listened to all the debate, we've had a good discussion. I got a great idea. Let's do it my way, okay? Now, if you never say that, right, you never get anything done. And if you say that 7 times instead of 3 times, good people bolt. But you have to be willing to stand apart ultimately. So I always look at that. And excuses turn everybody off, right?
Okay,
so lack of accountability. You know, I just think we don't expect people to have perfect careers. We expect them to learn from mistakes and get better. And the second you start making excuses, what that really says to everybody around you is you're not going to learn. You think you're above the process of getting better. So I'd put those on the 2 extremes.
Okay. Hardest person you ever had to fire?
Oh, look, I mean, I think it's you know, I had a person that worked for me as a CEO, right? And if you if you said to a recruiter, go find me a person to do this job, they would have brought that person back in to do that job. And there just was something that was missing about how he connected with the team.
Now,
and,
see,
and,
that's,
and that's, you know,
yeah.
you couldn't, you
Yeah.
just saw it in the results, you saw it in the way the team carried itself, but at the same time, he had values, he had many things that were tremendously
I'm
appealing.
fascinated by this because some years back, I had to make a tough leadership call. And when I went to some of my advisors and I said, I think this person's run is done, they said, is this person meeting your expectations? And I said, yes, generally. Is a person high integrity? Yes. Smart? Yes. You know, godly? Yes. And they said, why wouldn't you want to keep this person in that position? And it felt so squishy, but I said, the person is not connecting with his staff. He's not connecting with the rest of the team. And someone said to me, you wouldn't let someone go simply for something as squishy as not connecting. I said, I think so. You're saying the same thing?
Same thing. And I was right on this one. Unfortunately, you know? Like, it's one where you want to be wrong because you love the person.
Yeah, right.
But it turned out everything I felt, like the second they left, people said, God, thank God, what took you so long? Right? And you just kind of sit there and say, what is it that I'm not seeing, right?
Okay.
But most times, like you know, you're in the business of giving people confidence, right?
Yeah.
What you really want in the people that work for you is you want them to be self-confident, and you can give them feedback, negative feedback sometimes, but you want to do it within the tapestry of making them self-confident. When sometimes you can just see somebody loses confidence in themselves, that's when they have to leave.
Yeah. Hey, you've made a big deal. I mean, like, put your neck on the line for the value of diversity in GE. This is a deeply held value. Where did that deeply held value originate in your life? And how do you go about, fostering that celebration of diversity?
I think, Bill, similar to you, if you believe in talent and meritocracy, right? If you believe in talent and meritocracy, you must believe in diversity. You must believe that anybody can do any job, no matter where they come from. You want to attract a very diverse and balanced group because that's how you're going to win. That's how you're going to be the best in the world you're in today. And that's, it's men and women, it's African Americans, but in our world, it's more than half our people live outside the United States. It's global diversity, but we are absolutely focused, laser-like focused on having the best people, and we're laser-like focused on meritocracy. And that's what makes people...
The best ideas.
Best ideas, the best people get ahead. And you cannot have those things. If people walk in your office and don't see diversity, it's not so much that they feel offended. Some do. But that's a code for they don't care about people, and the best people aren't getting ahead. Because I hate to admit it, you and I are about the same age, but old white guys don't have every great idea. It's just the way it is. So it's just
this is it's a shattering revelation to me. So take me just a moment here. If we can go over sort of one click, political diversity. Now, rumor has it, we've never talked about this in a serious way, but rumor has it you would be more on the conservative Republican side of things, perhaps. And then when President Obama, who may be more democratically inclined, so he calls you and he wants you to lead the program on getting more jobs going in America. Tell us about how you came to your decision to help him.
So I had gotten to know, Bill, I'd gotten to know the president through Rahm Emanuel, who had been a friend of mine for a long time, the mayor here in Chicago, good guy. And so I'd gotten to know the president in 2008, 9, and 10. I'd worked on kind of original advisory group for the president. And then I'm center-right, so I'm a Republican, and he wanted to form a council on jobs and competitiveness and asked me at the end of 2010 to lead that council. I grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and my parents are much more conservative than I am. And they watch 5 or 6 hours of Fox News every day, right? So I called my mother and I said, hey, tomorrow I'm going to be in Schenectady, New York with the president, and he's asked me to lead his jobs council. And she said, well, you said no, of course. And I said, well, Mom, you remember you taught me about civics and all that stuff. And it's always, look, we live at a time where everybody thinks there's an angle in everything somebody in public does. The 24 of us that did this really did it because we wanted to help. We really did it because we wanted to make a difference. It was CEOs, labor leaders, economists, and I'm proud of the work we did. I'm proud to have done it. I enjoyed working with the president, but really, again today we want to be cynical about everything. The sense was we really wanted to make a difference in how the competitiveness of the country goes. Look, business people, we're a global enterprise. We do business all around the world. In our industrial setting, almost 70% of our revenue is outside the United States, but we're proud to be an American company. And a confident society is a competitive society. We need the ability to compete, and the more we can drive confidence in our economy, the better off all of us are going to be.
Hey, you talk a lot about, You talk a lot about the concept of simplification. So can you explain that?
So I got to my room last night, and there was a book on my desk that you'd written called Simplification. So put her there, brother. No, I think institutions in your own life, I'd say we're all searching in this global, really complicated world, new ways to run institutions. So we're 140 years old, big, complicated, and we live in a complicated world, highly regulated. And I felt probably 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, again, having been in Crotonville and places like that, I wasn't sensing the joy in work, look, in the end, I've done this long enough, it's all my fault. So when I'm critical, it's not like I'm blaming anybody other than myself. But I just felt like, one more rule, one more meeting, we were just losing sight of our purpose as a company. And I spent a fair amount of time, I still do, but I was spending a fair amount of time in Silicon Valley with entrepreneurs and startup companies to really try to figure out how they saw their world and what they were doing. And we started about 18 months ago on what we call the cultural of simplification. And I would describe it, Bill, as kind of the interwoven concept of kind of 4 ideas. One is less management, right? We just empower people, get decisions closer to the market, put the decision makers in the field where they belong. Smaller headquarters, bigger in operations, fewer meetings, fewer processes, less of everything.
Yep.
Lean management. The market rules. Why do I come to work in the morning? It's not to go to a meeting in the conference room, it's to satisfy customers. Our future, job security, whatever future you have, gets created in the marketplace. Become hyper-competitive. 3, put things on the clock. Start small, but start today. Start today. What we call fast. Test and learn. Don't feel like you have to be perfect, but test and learn. And the 4th aspect is, we just live in a world with it's networked and transparent. So use information technology to network the company better, make it more transparent. So think about simpler structure, focused externally, a real focus on speed, and a sense that you can, with information, you can empower people with information in ways you couldn't do it before. And old big companies like GE have to constantly be paranoid about just getting too trapped in our history. And so about every 5 or 10 or 15 years, you got to be willing to blow it up and start all over. And that's what we talked about. It's what you have 10 rules of simplification. I can plug each thought I have into one of your 10 rules in there. And I think people are thirsting for that.
Well,
Carly talked about it. It's just, look, I respect everybody who's willing to be a public servant in our country. These are really thankless jobs, but the system of governance is just antiquated. They were trying to get things done by and things like that, and the world is, at the same time, moving so quickly. You've got to be willing to throw out the old, and I think every good institution today is trying to find a way to govern itself in an effective way in a broadly different time.
Hey, so I hesitate to bring this up because, as you noted earlier, we're both very young men. But at some point in your future, you're going to have to create a succession plan. Now, you went through one that was pretty taxing. I've read pretty much everything you've written about your feelings, about what your transition plan, what the one Jack put together that you had to endure. All right, so you came out and you were the new CEO. You have to put one of these together at some point. How will your transition plan be different from the one you were subjected to by Jack?
So I think the first thing I'd say is this is, I've got a big part in this, but the board also plays a big part in this, so we do it as a team. I think, and the second thing I'd say is I loved working for Jack Welch. He was a great CEO. He was fun to work with and challenging, and I have such tremendous affection. I think it was just, maybe it's just the times. It was just too public. In other words, I think the matters of corporate governance today, I think can be orchestrated inside the company in a way where you don't have to make it quite as public.
So
as
did that put kind of an unnecessary amount of pressure on you because it was public? By hindsight, is that one of your...
Well, look, I mean, ultimately, I think it turned out the right way, right? So it's... But
it just didn't have to be so hard.
It just didn't have to be so hard, you know? And I think it's just, there are things that don't need to be in the public view, that can be done more naturally, it would be my sense. But again, I think this is a great CEO and a beautiful guy that I loved working for.
But as you put yours together, one of your commitments
it's going to be more private.
It's going to be more private.
Yeah.
Is it going to be as long?
Oh, look, I think because it's private, you won't
I'll
know the
never
answer
know.
to that. I mean, I would say it'll happen just like that. Right?
Hey, a few years back, when the economy was a little rough, you refused to take a bonus that your board afforded you 2 years in a row. Did you not need the money?
Oh, look, I don't think there's anybody out there would say any of us are underpaid. I think it all is personal. In other words, I think in the end, I've heard some CEOs say, look, my board made me take that, or my board, how you get portrayed in the proxy is got to be in my heart, got to be what I think is right. And I felt like it was a way to be accountable for whatever was happening in the economy and the company at that time, right? But like I said, I think it's small in nature. It's not like bad things were going to happen to the Immelt family or things like that.
You didn't miss a rent payment.
But the constituency you play to, in most of these, in a time of crisis, the constituency you play to the most is not the media, it's your own team. Oh. And I think the day I became CEO, 12 years ago now, I said to the team, you're going to, over time, you're going to question my decisions, but you're never going to question my intentions. And I think I can look back over 12 years and say that's been true. They've questioned some of the decisions for sure, but I don't think there's anybody in the 300,000 plus people that doesn't say that I put the company first in everything I do. So I think in a period, in the most difficult times, when it's 15 minutes till midnight, your team counts the most.
Yeah. And along those lines, the worst thing, I tried to dig up some dirt. And the worst thing that I could find about you is that you work 80-hour weeks and you only take 12 days off per year.
Well, if this makes your point, I'm actually on vacation this week. So
This is one of the 12 right now?
I lead so here's what I would say about it. So I'm a hard worker. I like work. I love work, but I have a great family. I've got a wife and one daughter, and I would say if you lead a challenging business life, you need a simple personal life. So I have one company, one wife, one daughter. So I try to keep it very focused. And I love what I do. So it's a treat. The other thing I would say is, and I think this is maybe something for you or the people here, or something I think when I read about you, it's my dad worked for GE, so I know the power of a GE job. And people today, when you walk through a factory, people love what they do. People love having a job. And no matter what gets written about business leaders or CEOs, we all know that. We all kind of grew our careers inside a company, and we respect work and workers immensely. I don't need anybody to tell me the value of a GE job. But the one thing we can't, and it's heartbreaking, we can't guarantee outcomes, right? I mean, you got to be competitive. It's a global market. You got to sell hard. But what we can look everybody in the company in the eye and say, we can guarantee process. We're going to play to win, and no one will ever outwork us. No one will ever work harder than GE works. No one will ever play to win like GE plays to win. And so if you trust us, that we're willing to everybody from the top of the company down is gonna work hard on your behalf, invest money on your behalf, and play to win. That's the best I can offer to you, right? So that's just, I think in some ways that's the symbol we want people to think about inside the company. I think they, like I said, we're not perfect and our leaders aren't perfect, but I think they can look in their businesses and say, these people want to win and they are out willing to pay the price to get the job done.
Okay, Jeff, one last question. And so, I'm not trying to start trouble. I know your wife is a little bit more regular in her church attendance than you are. Now, so the most diplomatic way that I want to address this, when you do join your wife and you go to church, okay, and let's just say it's not even the current church that your family goes to, but if you were to show up at a church and you had worked an 80-hour week and you were pretty tired out, you walk into a church service, what would you hope to experience if you could just say, oh, here's what would feel great if I could experience this in a church? What comes to mind?
I'd say, Bill, going back to the point, the last question you asked is, big leadership jobs like yours or big company like GE, things like that, you're on all the time, right? And people look to you all the time. And it probably took me being CEO a couple years to really, I started saying less because people thought everything coming out of my mouth had meaning.
Yeah,
sometimes I was just babbling, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't really mean it that way. Don't do that. Holy cow.
Yeah.
And so I think you train yourself to regenerate maybe just in a couple hours a week is all it takes to be able to do it again, right? And I think leadership, going back to the point of leadership is this intense journey into yourself. It's how much you're willing to learn, how much you're willing to give. It's about self-renewal, self-reflection, just resiliency and things like that. And it is, I go to New Canaan Presbyterian Church in Connecticut, and the ability to sit for an hour and be at peace and listen to somebody else talk, right? Other than me, right? And just get a few ideas or just be at peace. I think for that is priceless. That is worth, and I can't even tell you how how valuable it is.
All right, let's thank Jeff Immelt.
Thank you very much.